Hello, and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate, divorce support for dads, where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. My name is Jude Sandoval, and I'm your host. I created this podcast in the Divorced Advocate community as a result of my own high conflict divorce, and because you as a dad deserve all the resources necessary to thrive through this challenging time. I encourage you to check out our website at thedivorcedadvocate.com, where there are resources that correspond to this episode, as well as free access to our membership community, where you will find live meetings, free workshops and courses, private discussion groups, and more. And now, on to this week's episode. Hello and welcome. I am so excited that you are here. And before we get going on our topic today, which is going to be a parental alienation, I just wanted to welcome some of the new members of the Divorced Advocate community. I want to welcome Janelle and Marshall and Travis and Robert this week. The community continues to grow a massive amount, and this is going to be we just passed our 150th broadcast here, so it's a big milestone, and it's all thanks to you, and so appreciative of your listenership and spreading the word far and wide. Let's continue to do that and get the word out to help as many people as possible. And on that note, I want to introduce my guest, who is doing his best as well to help as many people as possible, and that's why I'm so thrilled to have him, and he's agreed to spend some time with us today and talk about the topic of parental alienation. I know his heart is exactly where mine is in helping dads around this topic. He is a father who has endured the painful experience of losing contact with his two sons for over 3 years. And having now reunited with his sons, he founded 100,000 Fathers to mentor and guide other fathers who have lost contact with their kids due to divorce, parental alienation, or a sequence of life events. So please welcome Garry Junkuhn. Garry, welcome.
Jude, really good to be on here, brother. Appreciate it.
My friend, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago when you connected with me online, which I really appreciated you getting in touch with me. And before we kind of get into this topic, if you could just share a little bit about, your intro explains a little bit, but a little bit more detail and color around what it is and why you decided to get into this and found 100,000 Fathers.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the brief intro there. So this is a journey that, many fathers that are listening to this, and mothers, it sounds like you've got mothers and fathers. This affects both sides. And this is a journey I went through just under 8 years ago, where I lost my two sons when they were 10 and 12 years old. And it was that first year, and it seems to be a very overlapping thing for many parents who haven't got to see their kids. It's this train that smashes through your life, or a fire that burns everything. And it is such a painful event, and there is no education on this that you go through in terms of,
right?
Your friends, family, college, anywhere. Unless you've experienced this, you've got no idea that something like this could even take place to you and in your life. And so, when this took place, I was not prepared for it, and it's this. My life just collapsed. My journey was, my catalyst was married for 10 years. Separated for about 3 years and got divorced, and I started dating, and there was a lady that I really fell in love with. Dated her for about 6 months, and then after that decided to introduce my two sons to her. Everything went amazingly well for about 4 or 5 months, and then we decided she was going to move in with me, and that was the start of really an unfolding of my life, and just a really difficult situation for my sons to understand that, if this woman would have been their stepmother, it didn't mean that, it's going to be like the Disney movies, the wicked stepmother. And I think that might have been in their mind. There's too many terrible stories about that.
Right.
And then I think fear really crept in a little bit there. And I didn't understand how to properly introduce my sons to a woman. When you're dating, it's a very complicated thing.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if it's the first time. And for that partner, it's a very difficult thing for them, especially if they don't have kids, as was the case for my partner back then. And so everything just got worse and worse and worse and worse to the day that she moved in. And I thought of what they were saying to try and stop that from taking place and all the terrible events leading up to that. It was just a painful sequence of events for me. And I can't even imagine what they went through. But the day she moved in was the last day I saw them for 3 years. And I just could not believe something like that would happen. And, fortunately, I had two very good people in my life. And one of them, he is about 62 at the time, my mentor. And it was about 7 months into not seeing my sons. And I met up with him at a restaurant for some coffee. And I said to him, I don't understand why my sons don't want to see me. And, he said, Garry, what is the gift in this situation? I said, what do you mean? How on earth can this be a gift? This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Right.
And then I realized, man, this weekends that I would get to see my sons, what am I going to do with that time? And that was the start of this concept of this gift within my life, where I started transforming everything within my life, just healthy eating, exercising, reading books, podcasts, TED Talks, just immersing in all this good stuff that just transformed my life. And I thought it would be a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two. It was just after a year, I decided to do more and more uncomfortable things. And one of the things I decided to do was go and sleep in a forest alone in a waterproof sleeping bag. And I just exposed, by myself, never done something like that before. Just as I was about to enter the forest, I checked my phone one last time before turning it off. And there was an email from my son's school. And in that, instead of his first name and my last name, he had changed his surname to my ex-wife's maiden name. And that just for me made me realize in my mind, the story was this might be 10 or 20 years before I get to see them again. And that became the catalyst for this reboot in my life. I mean, ahead of that, within that year, I ended up turning 40, holding on to an x-ray machine with just pains throughout my stomach, everything that I'd eat and drink. 2 companies I was running just spiraled down. Just everything was collapsing in my life because my mind just was imploding in on itself over the suffering I was going through. Fast forward 2.5 years, I had an amazing friend that I ended up traveling. I ended up leaving that city I was in. I rebooted my life and sold and gave away everything down to a backpack. It was 55 items in this backpack, and I restarted my life. Had I not done that, I probably wouldn't be here today. It was that bad where I was at. And I ended up in Argentina and Colombia in South America, and I was heading towards Mexico. And my friend that I was traveling with that I'd met when I was passing through London became a good friend of mine. He had heard me talk so often about my sons and how much I love them, and I just don't know how this is going to work out in the future. And he said, man, you've got to try and reach out to them. And up to this point, my sons had blocked me. It was pretty much impossible to have a conversation with my ex that many parents have, partners in that situation, that it was so toxic for both of us. And so I ended up booking a flight from there to England where my sons live. And I ended up arranging to meet up with my ex-wife. And it truly felt like I was walking into a gladiator arena because she lived in the family I left. There were 60 family members on her side. And I hadn't spoken to any of them in that time. So your mind creates all these terrible stories. They're going to be waiting for me with pitchforks and tar and feather me because they didn't understand what actually happened there. And so when I arrived, it was at a Starbucks actually. And my ex was waiting there already in the coffee shop. And it was just walking into a fridge at first and just this real aggression. And understandably, she hadn't heard from me in 2.5 years up to that point. And ended up being 4 hours a conversation. She ended up sharing photos of my sons that I hadn't seen. I mean, 2.5 years by that stage, they had changed so much. And at that stage, I said, could I go and meet up with my sons? And she said, let me see. And they weren't ready at that stage. But 6 months later, I got a message through Instagram from my older son. And the message was, hi, Dad, I can see you doing pretty well for yourself. You know that I've always wanted to become a professional motocross rider. is there any way that you could help me buy a motocross bike? I promise you I'll pay you back. And I don't know why, Dad, but I stay awake till 5 o'clock in the morning crying because I miss you so much. And that was the start of the reuniting, and it's been reunited since then. I flew to England, saw my boys, and that was about 6 years ago that took place now. So,
okay.
5.5, and I've just got this beautiful relationship. And it was 3 years ago that it came to me in a meditation. You need to reunite 100,000 fathers to their kids. I had no idea how on earth to do that. I didn't even know the term parental alienation, hadn't met another father that had ever gone through something like that. But now this journey, I've spoken to hundreds of fathers around the world and guided them through my programs in the community. And it's just been this most incredible stories that have unfolded from this, and fathers who have reunited with their kids and changes in their life, even though for some of them that don't reunite, it's this healing that's taken place inside of them. But I'll go through that and talk about that in a little bit more detail. But that's a long story short. Been a hell of a journey, but just
that's pretty powerful stuff, Garry. And I know a lot of people out there listening to that can relate to a lot of that, a lot of the pain and suffering and difficulty and sickness and disease that are a result of that, like manifesting up through your body. And this, we talk about it on the show, and we actually in our group meeting this morning, we were talking about what happens if you don't do the work like you were describing and work on, we're designed a specific way to have this stuff come up for us to pay attention to, right? If we don't, then it's, our body's not going to stop telling us it's going to get sick, or it's going to get disease, or we're going to get hurt, whatever. So yeah, it's there's a lot of people out there listening that can relate to that. Now, before we get into that, let's, you've got a counterintuitive process in which you subscribe to around parental alienation, and we've had this discussion. I think I mentioned earlier, we probably agree on 90% of things, right? Maybe some of the process we don't agree on, and we're going to get in. We're going to talk and share about that. Before we do that, though, let's specifically explain what we're talking about as far as parental alienation to the audience, because it's not that the ex just talks bad about you or is just not polite to you or something. This is a concerted effort by your ex or soon to be ex to alienate your children, to influence your relationship with your children to the point where they don't want to, or they're being gatekept from you in order to cease you having a relationship with them. So that is the what we're talking about in this case, parental alienation. It's an extreme case, and these are extreme cases, and it's not the norm. I wouldn't say. I would say the majority of people, unfortunately, you and some others, me in some regards also, have had to experience this. But the majority of people co-parent well. They have their kids' best interest in mind, but there are a minority of people that's men and women that have mental health issues, and I would subscribe, and we can debate this too if you want. That's a parent that is alienating their children from one or the other parents does have some kind of mental emotional issue or mental disorder that they're not working on or working through. Because if we're looking at this from a perspective of what is healthiest for a kid, no matter what the circumstances and how egregious, unless there's some specific real abuse happening, boys and girls, kiddos need to have both a mother and father in their lives.
Yes. Yeah, I'd love to expand upon that. And there is many other situations that can take place there outside of a mental disease tied in with this. And this is where a mother and father, husband and wife, don't agree. They get divorced. They've been living together for 10 years, whatever it is. And they want to move on with their lives. They meet another partner. You imagine if it's, say, on the mother's side, she meets another partner. It's very difficult for her to move on with her life with still her ex coming around to visit. So this is where the new man might not be able to accept that man. And that can cause a lot of conflict, and the mother can see this is not working out well in terms of each time the father comes around, that new man and the ex ends up fighting. Mm-hmm. And so she's concerned that that's going to sabotage that relationship. And this is where primarily inside of her, she's trying to keep that new relationship together. So she's trying to do whatever she can to make sure that that doesn't break that relationship down. And this is where can be the subconscious start of parental alienation. Very easy for that to happen. Also, meets that new man, wants to move to another state, or, for a man meets another woman and they want to move to another state. And this is where so much conflict can take place. And as it is in a previous relationship, they might not have been able to agree. Now they're apart, it's even worse. So all of those become such a huge catalyst for this, and it just becomes one negative situation stacked upon another. And this is why I say a sequence of life events.
Sure.
For me, part of this was my way that I navigated this with this new partner and how I approached that situation. And probably my ex's mind was thinking she was doing the right thing by keeping the sons away from me, and might have said things she shouldn't have said. A lot of that was just this primal trying to protect my sons. I know had I understood what I understood now, would have changed the course of my life. Looking back, I'm glad it all happened because it's resulted in the relationship I have with my kids now and the better man that I've become, and all the fathers that I guide through this counterintuitive approach. So there are many different factors there, but just very important to know it's not just always a mental disorder. I've had so many different cases now where it is such a broad range of situations.
Sure. There is definitely a broad range of situations, but somebody that is keeping their child, they may think, and we talk about this all the time in group, and I talk about this in private practice all the time. How and why they're thinking the way they do, we cannot ever understand.
Correct.
But what we can agree upon is the fact that, and I think you and I can both agree upon the fact that a child needs both a father and a mother 100%. in their lives. So, my only point being that whomever is doing the alienating has some thought process that is not putting the kid's best interest at the forefront. Okay. Whether that's a primal, or whether that's a primal, I would argue we've evolved to the point, Garry, where you need to be able to think through this. We've had the ability to think through and understand, if we're doing the work, we understand our primal urges and our primal needs and our primal actions, et cetera. So I would still posit that she didn't think through this and didn't do the work that she needed to do to understand. But sometimes even if they do, they just don't think the same way we do. And they make decisions based upon that, and cannot put somebody or something else ahead of what it is they're doing. But I don't think it's going to help us to talk about that. No. Let's talk about let's talk about the point that you made just now, and also in your intro, about doing the work that you really need to do, and doing it soon, and then doing it continually, and creating that life. We call it life 2.0 in our community, but yes. You called it like a new life or whatever your description of it was. But I think that is one thing we're definitely going to agree upon, because regardless of anything, like even if you're not being alien, you listen to this and you're not experiencing alienation, this is something that you have to be doing in your life for your kiddos. So talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. I call it the upward spiral journey, and working on your pillars. The 4 core pillars are your mind, body, relationships, and income. There are a few other pillars. We can touch on those in a bit. But what happens is, the amount of alienated children that I've spoken now that are grown adults that have shared stories of when they have reunited with their father, how angry that father is or hasn't put in the work, that when that child is raising difficult things about what happened in the past, because that child is trying to clear up things in the past, that father's not prepared for that and hasn't done the work, that ends up saying things that he regrets. And it's often also like a drowning man as well. Could be a year, it could be 10 years, whatever it is, he hasn't seen his child for that time. When he sees that person, often in that time, if he hasn't been putting on the work, his life has been slowly spiraling down.
Right.
He's given up on his body. He's not going to the gym. He's not eating healthily. His relationships have been damaged because he doesn't know how to talk about his story. And it's this victim story that can often come out instead of the hero's journey. I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so by working on these pillars, the analogy here is almost like a volcano that you stuff down all this pain, all this suffering, all this story deep down inside of you. And finally, you get to have your child. Everything is great initially. And then you have that one restaurant meeting and it goes to 4 hours and you cover all the surface level stuff. And then she said, so why did you leave mom? Or why did you leave dad? Whatever it is on either side there. Or why didn't you pay child maintenance? Whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And it's most likely not true, but that's the story the child's been told.
Right.
And if that father isn't ready for that and realizing that child is like a shaken up jar of wasps, he's going to just erupt and say the wrong thing. Why did your mother say that? Mm-hmm. And that could be the last time that father would ever see that child, where the child is going to say, my dad is too toxic. I don't want to be around him. I'm going to put these boundaries. I don't want to let the grandkids near that man. And mm-hmm. that's a double death blow to a man who has been waiting for that moment for all those years. So what happens, men put their entire lives on hold, waiting for this moment to reunite with their kids. And
Can I stop you real quick? Okay, so yeah, you're fast forwarding like if they've already been alienated and then they're not prepared. But I also want to make the point that that's an important place. It's important to get yourself into that place, at least mentally and emotionally, as soon as possible, to have because that conversation is going to happen.
Yes,
even if you're not alienated, right? It's going to be at some point. Why did you and mom? Depending on how old your kids are and where you're at in the process, right? Mine were young, 6, 4, and 2 when we started. But at some point, they're going to want to talk about this. And it's going to be an important part of their growth because they went through this experience and shared this experience with you. So it's going to be important for you to be able to handle that. So even if you're not alienated, you need to be able to have that conversation without doing what you said, which is blowing up or blaming 100%. Or bad mouthing or whatever, because that's just not going to do anything. So getting to the point that you need to, as quickly as possible, and this isn't to say, right, like you need to quit everything and go on a backpacking journey, like for 2 years, right? Now you did that. That's been your experience. I wouldn't say that that's everybody has to do, but you do have to start somewhere and start putting in that work and understand that this experience here, this divorce is difficult and as tragic and as heartbreaking, as painful as is meant for you to have something greater in the future. But that's only going to start with you. Would you agree?
100%. Absolutely. And I'll talk, it's such a broad range of parents that this takes place for. Specifically mm-hmm. for me, it's the fathers, where mm-hmm. early stages where they can see that sign. Daughters, 11 years old, 12 years old, start saying, I don't want to spend the weekend with you. I don't want to see you.
Right.
And it's so hard for that father to understand why that's taking place. So a large part of this is understanding what their child is going through. Where they're caught in the middle of all of this, they almost feel like they're betraying the other parent if they want to go and see you. If they say, can mm-hmm. I see dad? I want to see him. I want to call him. It's betraying the mother. And right. so, or the other parent. And so if that father hasn't put in that work, that weekend is going to be maybe resorting to maybe some alcohol, maybe going onto social media and finding out what's happening with their kids or other ways of abusing their lives, staying in bed. That's probably one of it's the start of this where it seems so small, mm-hmm. but if it can creep up on you so quickly. So this is where to work on those pillars. It's making sure you're moving your body, start mm-hmm. out slow if you haven't done exercise, walking, and then getting into the gym. What I love is, just doing push-ups and air squats, burpees, things like that as you progress. Eating healthy, remove toxins out of your life because those change your mind and the way you handle stress. It's this ability to handle difficult things. And if you have got a very poor diet, your mind is going to be thinking very clearly to be able to handle when that difficult question comes up and remain that lighthouse in that child's life. to be able to endure those waves that are crashing in there. So these principles apply if you're early stages and your child is saying, I don't want to spend the weekend with you, and you say, okay, fine, but next weekend let's see each other. That can be just the start where you got to start putting that work from that moment. In fact, even before that, if you're a parent listening to this, it takes time to get these habits into place. But when you do get to see your child, what are they seeing you doing? Watching TV all the time and Netflix all the time? Or are you doing exercise? Are you going hiking, taking them to all these different events, all these positive experiences, not having to take them off to Disneyland every weekend, but just a walk, a picnic, butterfly sanctuary, watching the stars, sunset, sunrise, beautiful experiences like that. And then they see you with your relationships around you. Are you this broken man, angry, pushing everybody away? Is this the same story that that child's been told about you? Or is it the opposite, where you're not angry, you're not broken, you're not upset about the world and what's happened? You are showing through your own example to that child how life should be.
Right.
And that is what I also say is a gravitational force in the life of that child.
Yeah, so it's exactly that. And you're not far off from that, right? It's energetic.
Yes.
And one of the big takeaways I finally had, right, and I'm like slower than most people in figuring this stuff out, and was how I wake up in the morning and the energy that I project from the time that I get out of bed is how the day is going to go for everybody, right? Yes. And I know that seems like a lot of pressure, but hey, it is true. You are a gravitation. You're like the sun, and us particularly as men in a family, and innately in the way we're designed, the leaders of our family and our children, we are like that sun. So it is a gravitational thing. Is if we're gonna show up shining and we're gonna show up in that good energy, then that's gonna be a tone that will be set that is going to be more positive. Doesn't mean it's going to solve everything, but Correct. That's going to be definitely a positive. But if you can't even get out of bed, like you said, and they see you laying in bed, and then they see you like struggling to just get out and function in a day, then that's going to create a problem and a challenge. And you talked about the physical fitness part of it. So in the community here, we talk about the kind of four legs of the stool for self-care: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, right? You need to be taking care of all four of those, because if one of them's off, that stool falls out of whack. And trust me, when you're going through this, as you know, and I know, and everybody that's listening probably knows, is, there's going to be some pressure on that one that's out of whack, and then everything gets off kilter, right? So you got to be taking care of all of those areas. And for those of you just going through it, I think what you said, Garry, about the physical part of it, I think that's the easiest one. And let me know what you think to start with, right? Yes. In making sure to get, to bolster that self-care and those four legs of the stool, because just doing the exercise, whether it's going for a hike or a walk, it can be as simple as that. That actually is more twofold of physical as well as mental, right? It's helping that mentality and helping you process things when you're doing that, or working out, or doing significant physical cardio or lifting or whatever it is. That's a real great place to start in this journey, and then being able to maybe add some more of those different areas.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jude with a quick reminder about the Divorced Advocate Foundation for Fathers, which is our nonprofit that helps dads through divorce with legal education, free or reduced cost coaching, and mental health resources. If you own a business or know someone who does, there's an easy way to help by connecting credit card processing through our partner program. Part of the fees go straight to the foundation with no added cost to the business, and 98% of businesses are actually able to save money on their processing fees. It's a win-win. So if you know a business that accepts credit cards, get them in touch with me by sending a warm introduction email to jude@thedivorcedadvocate.com, or give me a call directly at 720-255-1021.
Yeah, absolutely. The physical side, it's something that anybody who's listening to this call right now, is you can take action on this straight away. One of the things when I start with the fathers through the program is I'll ask them, go into your fridge and your cupboards, take out everything that's unhealthy and doesn't serve you in terms of the man and father that you want to become in the future, and separate the things that you know you might be able to give away, like in terms of maybe there's some white bread or some other unhealthy things. Take that down to a homeless, section of your city or town and give that away with some fruit and other healthy things. But the rest, throw it away. And have that in your mind, especially alcohol. Coffee can just mess you up, your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep is so critical in terms of the healing process and nurturing your body and giving you the energy to be able to endure this. So that's an immediate thing that you can actually do, is throw away all of that stuff and have it in your mind saying, does this food and drink serve me? Yeah, that lovely, delicious donut, 5 minutes of pleasure, but it has such a negative impact on how you actually function. So that one, moving your body, just a 5-10 minute walk, if you can get into nature, beautiful. Even walking slowly, and something I get the fathers to do is find the beauty in everything. Go for a 1 hour walk, find the beauty in everything. And it just allows you to just shift your mind to, this is a negative thing, to looking intentionally and shifting your mindset to things that are positive. Then having a community. Now, it's important which community you're joining. There are sometimes Facebook groups where there's just all these bloodbath stories of all these negative things that are taking place, and this aggression can fuel and give you so much fear of how does this unfold, and hearing all these other terrible stories. But having a community is critical in something like this, and people that understand what you're going through. There are a number of communities that are out there, very few just communities for fathers that are guiding through this. And that's why, I've just thought I'd start, came to me to help fathers specifically, but joining other like-minded people to bounce off ideas in terms of what's working, what's not working, not spending hours sharing stories of all the pain and suffering. In the beginning of in 100K Fathers, that's how we started, but that wasn't very healthy.
No.
So those two things are very interconnected, and that's the relationship pillar, body, mind, that can be very interconnected there.
Well, in the community, you can start simple also with an exercise community, right? So
Yes.
I think the point here, what we're both saying is that don't self-isolate, because you can't do that. You can do it. You should not do it alone. It's not healthy. We're meant to be in relation with each other. You said that early, which I agree with 100%. So if you're going to start with the physical, find a community and start with that. And that's going to help you through part of this process. Yes. And then that might be then finding another community, which might be divorced dads, or maybe it's another community around meditation. You talked about a meditation. I'm a firm believer in meditation and the practicer of meditation. It helps you, to regulate all of the, so while you're doing that work on the outside with your body, meditation's helping you do that work and that exercise on the inside with your mind and your heart and your soul, right? So it's a different type of exercise and work, but, find those communities. It doesn't have to be one community. It can be multiple communities. Correct. Now, this gets challenging when you have kids and work and, you want to date maybe and all that other stuff, but that comes to then having to figure out your life and work within that and what's important to you. And then, there's a lot of life to live. Laying in bed is not the way to live your life. Okay. In front of the TV is not the way to live your life. Like, there's so much going on in part. I honestly feel that part of going through this for me was having to really weed out and prioritize what is important to me. Yes. And then focusing on what is important. So let's talk, around that a little bit, because you talked about, the pillars, the mind, the body, the relationship, and the finances, right? So finding what's important within those and then doing what with it.
Absolutely. And we are social creatures, and this is where that connection takes place. And if you look at it, and I'll use an example, a herd of cattle. If there's one cattle or cow that's ill, it will take itself off away from the herd and go off to die. When we're going through something like this, we know things are not right. everybody around us isn't going through something like this. So we isolate ourselves, and that's where you end up staying in bed for longer and separating, not going out socially. But if you look at, if you want to punish somebody in a prison, put him into solitary confinement.
Yep.
And so by staying alone, very, very short term, maybe for the day or two, fine, but be conscious of what's happening there, because that can creep up on you very quickly. So yes, find a walking club, a running club. Start with that. Allows for that connection with other people. You're moving your body, the conversations, all of that is so vital there. And this then is this momentum that you start building in your life, and getting obviously all of this into balance. Don't go out and to sign up to absolutely everything. You've got to have that balance. It's building a structure. You don't have one pillar extremely high and the other pillars really low. You've got to have a pretty balanced life. And I love the analogy, and I use that as well, that four-legged chair. But you can add extra pillars. So it's the mind, body, relationships, income. Spiritual is definitely one. And that's what allows many fathers to be able to get through this, when both your mind is collapsed, your body's collapsed, relationships collapse. That's the one that actually gets you through all of this.
Yes.
Then it is adventure and story. What kind of a man, what movie are you creating that your kids want to be a part of when you do get to see them in the future? And this reminds me of a story of one of the fathers I'd worked with. He was a school teacher, 3 kids, saw his daughter, stayed with him, son didn't see, and his oldest daughter didn't see. And about 7 months into this, he joined 100K Fathers. 4 months prior to that, barely could get out of bed. And he then started joining in, and this shift in mindset, realizing you've got to prepare for that moment when you get to see your kids. Got back to chopping wood, camping trips, taking little road trips with his daughter. A couple of months later, his son reached out to him. Hi, Dad, can we go for dinner? Over that dinner, the son asked him, what have you been doing, Dad, all this time? Fortunately, he didn't say, I've been in bed all this time. I've been depressed. I don't know how to handle this. He said, man, I've been taking your sister on these road trips and here and there and chopping wood. He was like, that's amazing. The father asked him, what have you been doing? All I've been doing is playing games. Dad, can I come move in with you? 1 week later, that son moved in with him. And so this is preparing for that moment. So either if you're seeing your kids, they're observing you, are you struggling with this situation, or you just taking that action when you feel like you want to eat those donuts and watch TV, you just putting on those shoes, going for a walk, going for a run, removing those toxins out of your life, connecting with other people. And then contribution is a huge one. Volunteer your time if you're able to do that. That puts everything into perspective of where your life is compared to other people. And then your story doesn't seem as bad. And that already creates the shift inside of your mind. So multiple pillars there, and each of these builds a very strong foundation for your life that your kids can feel. That is a stronger and stronger gravitational force if you see them, or if that's the first time that you haven't seen them in some time.
Right. So, I agree 100% with all of that, and in particular the service to others part of it. And that if anybody is struggling right now, go volunteer.
Yes.
Because it will change your perspective when you're helping somebody, particularly if you are in a circumstance that is incredibly difficult or painful or challenging right now. It completely changes your mindset. And I would say if you're going through the most difficult, challenging time right now, gratitude, and go serve others, and you will get through this. If you do nothing else, if you go and serve somebody else, and you go volunteer with somebody else, and you write gratitude every single day, that's your mindset will shift to the point where you will be able to start doing the stuff that Garry and I are talking about right now, taking that first step to get out on a walk or get out in the gym. And don't get us wrong, anybody that's listening, it's not like this is all going to magically happen overnight. I think you said 2-3 years. Look, frick, it's 10 years for me, right? And I'm, and I still got the bad habits, right? Now, but I don't drink anymore. I don't smoke cigars anymore. Like, there's a ton of stuff that I don't do. I eat better, right? But that all happened over 10 years. It didn't happen overnight. And I'm completely different than I was 10 years ago. But there's still things that I do. I like donuts. I do eat donuts, Garry. I'm going to admit that on the show, right? Okay. I know that when I put that donut in my mouth, it's not the best choice for me, but I still do it. Okay. So I still have work to do, But, the point is measure yourself from where you were to where you are now, not to where you want to be. And I think maybe we can talk about this too around people or people that have been alienated already that don't have contact and feel like they've lost hope around ever having a relationship. Is if the if you are doing this, you talk about preparing yourself for that moment. If you are doing this and putting yourself in that place, what you're waiting for, and there's this analogy in sports, like all of the preparation happens in the practice, right? You just go out in the games and you execute. Like, you're not figuring it out and learning it when you're in the game, whether it's whatever the game is. It's all up front. It's all in the practice. And then there's this other saying is, you will perform in the game how you practice. So if you practice hard, then and right, you will execute, hard and right. So if you're losing hope and you feel like you're not, what you are doing is going to matter when that time comes up. So speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to comment about that donut. If you've ever made a fire before, that first stage of the fire is very difficult. You start off with just the small little sparks, the flame, kindling, going up to putting logs onto that fire. When that fire is burning brightly, you can put a damp log onto that fire. It will dry that log out and burn it. And so this is where, if you've got that momentum in your life, having a donut, a day in that where you just chill, at home and watch some movies, isn't going to have a major impact.
Right. Right.
But this is that compounding effect. So by just eating healthily and by itself is going to help within your life. But if you had eating healthily, meditation, journaling, volunteering, the exercise, each of these, the community, those have such a beautiful compounding effect that, yes, if you have that difficult day, you can lean on all the work that you've been putting in up to that point. And having the donut just gets burnt up in the fire. It doesn't have a great impact on your life.
Right, so, yeah, and let me be clear, I don't do that every morning, right? Yeah. I like them. We have them as a trait. No, I don't. We have the protein shake every morning, right? I intermittent fast. I don't eat till noon. Yeah, so no. It's but I do still like to have one, right? So, but yeah, you're exactly right. So all that other stuff, I like that analogy. I've not heard that with the bright burning fires, and you put the damp log on. You do that once. It is not pulling your life down, and it is also not interrupting that modeling that you want to be doing for your children. They can also see that you can. It actually is it's a positive. They can see that you are shining bright in all of these things, and you can also do something that it's okay occasionally. And it's not a bad thing, right? We're not we're not Puritans here. We're not 100%. Like anti-alcohol or anti-donuts or whatever. We're not professing that. We're just saying, dependent upon what you've structured in your life and how well you are operating within that structure and the model that you're creating for your children, then that depends on whether you should. Maybe you should just stop donuts for right now, right? Okay, until you can get to the point where that's not going to burn up your life. So, yeah, great point. I appreciate
it's
that.
The Pareto principle, that 80-20. 80% of the time, healthy eating, working out, whatever it is, your kids are going to watch that. And if you're just saying no to absolutely everything, it's not part of that gravitational movie they want to be a part of. And so there has to be that pleasure in it as well. But you can also find pleasure in the working out and all of those things. But not being so strict that you end up not being able to live your life is very important here. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've covered what we should be doing regardless of whether the children are being alienated or not. We should be doing this work. We should be modeling for our children a life and creating an environment in our household that they want to gravitate to, that's shining brightly. I love that shining brightly idea. And as men being the sun around which they can orbit and feed off of and grow and be nurtured and all that. I really like that. But let's now dive into where where we probably are divergent on our approaches, which is when we start to experience that alienation of the kiddos, and we start hearing what you started to say a little bit earlier, some of those conversations and some of that stuff that comes back, and then we start seeing different behaviors from our kids that just is completely different than what we've experienced with them, whether it's just started to happen through the divorce process, or you're divorced for a while, and it sounds like you were divorced for a little bit, and then they started to exhibit these behaviors. What you propose to do, and how you handle, or how you suggest to the men that you work with handling that when you start seeing them ask those questions, say things to you, that you are this or you are that is clearly not something that they can come up with in their, I think you said 10 and 13-year-old minds, that's, is coming from their mom. What is it that you're proposing that how do you handle that situation?
Well, many fathers that I've worked with that have seen all of those signs, and even, these kids that have progressed that further, where I don't want to see you. Mm-hmm. It is making sure that you understand the communication with that child. So in all of this process, that understand the communication, what that child's going through. So educating yourself in this process is critical. Knowing that that child is caught in the middle, that child can't say negative, is if that child says, I want to see dad, I love dad, I want to go and see him, that child gets caught in the middle. Mental disorder, whatever is involved from the mother's side or with the other parent, is definitely something that's terrible that's unfolding there.
So can we address that real quick? Because I think that's an incredibly important point to make to the audience. And it is the most challenging thing in this situation, but it is also one of the most amazing features that we have as human beings, which is
to hear the rest of this episode and access the corresponding resources, visit thedivorcedadvocate.com and become a member of our community. It's free to join and will provide you with the resources you deserve as a divorced or divorcing dad. Thank you for listening. God bless, and I'll talk with you next week.